By the way, John Cale.
It's not coming. You just need to get.
And I'm not gonna disappear on her.
The explosive used at the Capitol was a diversion.
Like what?
There's only one way to find.
I know you're into peace and all that, but you gotta stay.
I lost the recollection.
Shoot him! No, don't shoot him!
White House Down, 2013 Complete Analysis and Explanations. White House Down, 2013 Complete Analysis and Explanations. This opening section establishes that the following 90 paragraphs provide a thorough analytical breakdown of Roland Emmerich's political action thriller, released on June 28, 2013, by Sony Pictures Releasing. The film starred Channing Tatum, Jamie Foxx, Maggie Gyllenhaal, Jason Clarke, Richard Jenkins, and James Woods, and was produced on a $150 million budget, ultimately grossing approximately $205.4 million worldwide. This analysis provides a complete breakdown of Roland Emmerich's 2013 political action thriller, released on June 28, 2013, by Sony Pictures Releasing. The film starred Channing Tatum, Jamie Foxx, Maggie Gyllenhaal, Jason Clarke, Richard Jenkins, and James Woods, and was produced on a $150 million budget, ultimately grossing approximately $205.4 million worldwide. The historical context of this film is remarkable. 2013 witnessed two major Hollywood productions about terrorist attacks on the White House released merely 3 months apart. Olympus Has Fallen arrived in March, while this film followed in June, creating an unusual cinematic phenomenon that scholars now call the White House Under Siege double feature. Director Roland Emmerich later revealed that Sony Pictures knew about the competing Olympus Has Fallen project, but deliberately withheld this information from him until after he had committed to directing. Emmerich told GQ magazine, "They knew there was another film, but they didn't tell me. I got told by one of the producers." The film's protagonist, John Cale, portrayed by Channing Tatum, is introduced as a divorced Capitol Police officer and Afghanistan veteran assigned to protect Speaker of the House Eli Raffleson, played by Richard Jenkins. Despite his distinguished military service, including 3 tours in Afghanistan and receipt of the Silver Star, Cale struggles fundamentally to connect with his politically obsessed 11-year-old daughter, Emily, portrayed by Joey King. Hoping to impress Emily and win back her respect, John Cale applies for a position with the Secret Service. His interview is conducted by Carol Finnerty, played by Maggie Gyllenhaal, a former college acquaintance who deems him unqualified due to a perceived lack of authority and follow-through, leading Cale to lie to Emily about the outcome while still taking her on a White House tour. Meanwhile, President James Sawyer, portrayed by Jamie Foxx as a progressive commander-in-chief, stands on the precipice of signing a controversial peace treaty to remove all U.S. military forces from the Middle East. This decision has made him powerful enemies within Washington's military-industrial complex, setting the stage for the violent conflict to come. The attack begins when a bomb detonates in the U.S. Capitol building's rotunda, throwing Washington into immediate lockdown. While the city panics, a paramilitary team led by ex-Delta Force operative Emil Stenz, played by Jason Clarke, disguises itself as video technicians and infiltrates the White House. The mercenaries systematically kill Secret Service agents and seize control of the building with military precision. The tour group, including Emily, is taken hostage in the Blue Room by a white nationalist named Carl Killick, portrayed by Kevin Rankin, establishing a tense standoff situation. John Cale escapes the hostage situation when Emily separates from the group to use the restroom, allowing him to kill a mercenary, take his weapon and radio, and begin searching desperately for his daughter. This escape transforms him from a failed applicant into an unlikely lone hero. In a devastating narrative twist, retiring head of presidential detail Martin Walker, played by James Woods, escorts President Sawyer to the Presidential Emergency Operations Center, POC, only to reveal himself as the mastermind behind the entire attack. Walker seeks vengeance for his Marine son, who was killed in a botched Black Ops mission in Iran that Sawyer authorized and then politically abandoned. Cale overhears the situation via his stolen radio and rescues President Sawyer from the POC, forming an unlikely duo consisting of a rejected Capitol policeman and the leader of the free world. Together, they navigate the besieged White House, attempting to survive and retake the building. The mercenaries capture Emily after she successfully uploads incriminating video footage of them to YouTube, demonstrating how modern technology and a child's courage can challenge terrorist operations. Walker demands $400 million in ransom, but this is merely a cover for his true objective, forcing Sawyer to activate the nuclear football and launch missiles at Iranian cities. When Sawyer is presumed dead after a dramatic car chase that ends with a vehicle crashing into the White House pool, Vice President Hammond is sworn in under the 25th Amendment. The mercenaries then shoot down rescue helicopters with Javelin missiles and launch a missile at Air Force One, killing Hammond and everyone aboard. Speaker Raffleson becomes acting president and, believing Sawyer dead, orders an airstrike on the White House itself, creating a ticking clock scenario where the heroes must survive both terrorists and their own government's military response. This ironic situation underscores the film's critique of reflexive military solutions. Sawyer surrenders himself to save Emily, demonstrating presidential courage and personal sacrifice. Walker then reveals his true plan: to convey a message of American power through nuclear retaliation, using Sawyer's own authority against him in a perversion of presidential power. Cale stages a diversion by setting fires throughout the White House, freeing the hostages with help from Donnie the tour guide, who bludgeons Killick to death with a bronze clock in a moment of darkly comic violence. This minor character became a fan favorite for his hilarious outrage over damaged historical artifacts. Cale kills Stenz with a grenade belt before crashing a reinforced Chevrolet Suburban directly into the Oval Office and killing Walker with a minigun. Emily runs outside and waves a presidential flag to call off the incoming airstrike, saving everyone in a symbolic gesture of innocent patriotism. Sawyer survives thanks to a pocket watch once belonging to Abraham Lincoln that stops Walker's bullet, a sentimental touch that links America's greatest president with its current fictional leader. In the final twist, Cale and Finnerty expose Raffleson as Walker's accomplice, a puppet of the military-industrial complex who orchestrated the attack to sabotage Sawyer's peace treaty. Sawyer appoints Cale to the Secret Service, and the film ends with Marine One flying over Washington, D.C., as word arrives that other nations have agreed to the peace deal. This happy ending reaffirms the film's belief in diplomacy, family, and the essential goodness of American institutions. John Cale represents the blue-collar American hero archetype, competent but undervalued, flawed but principled. His military experience provides plausible justification for his combat effectiveness. Though critics noted he displays superhuman invincibility throughout the film's running time, Cale's primary motivation throughout is protecting his daughter, which grounds otherwise absurd action sequences in relatable paternal instinct. Unlike purely patriotic heroes, Cale fights not primarily for flag or country, but for his child's safety and respect. President James Sawyer is heavily inspired by Barack Obama, appearing as a progressive, family-oriented leader targeted by right-wing extremists. This intentional modeling gives the film contemporary political relevance and distinguishes it from more generic action thrillers. Sawyer functions as an action president who fights alongside the hero, unlike the passive leaders seen in similar films such as Air Force One or Olympus Has Fallen. He chews Nicorette, wears Air Jordans, and even kills one terrorist with his presidential fountain pen, delivering the line, "The pen is mightier." As Pop Matters noted, Sawyer isn't just Al to John McClane, urging on his cowboy antics via walkie-talkie. Rather, Sawyer is a fast-talking, Nicorette-chewing, bullet-wound-surviving, weapons-wielding, Jordans-wearing full-on hero, making him one of cinema's most active fictional presidents. Martin Walker serves as the film's most complex villain, driven by revenge for his son's death in a botched mission, while simultaneously suffering from a terminal brain tumor that explains his willingness to sacrifice everything. His motivations are tragic even as his methods are monstrous. Walker represents the hawkish military-first ideology that the film critiques, embodying the belief that American strength requires constant military action abroad. The revelation that the trusted insider is the traitor taps into post-9/11 anxieties about security threats originating from within trusted institutions. Emil Stens functions as the physical antagonist, a disavowed Delta Force operative tortured by the Taliban after being abandoned by his government. His grievance mirrors Walker's. Both men were burned by the system they served, making them ideological as well as tactical opponents. Stens serves as the muscle to Walker's brains, though Jason Clarke's intense performance gives him memorable menace independent of the larger conspiracy. His military precision contrasts with Cale's improvisational style, creating a compelling hero-villain dynamic. Emily Cale functions as an exposition vehicle, spouting White House facts learned from Wikipedia that conveniently provide background information to the audience. She also serves as John's motivational anchor, giving him a reason to fight beyond abstract patriotism. Emily's YouTube video exposing the terrorists' identities demonstrates how citizen journalism can challenge state-sponsored narratives. Her symbolic role waving the flag to stop the airstrike represents innocent patriotism unsullied by political calculation or military ambition. Emily has been criticized as a contrived character, yet she also represents the film's thematic core: the next generation worth saving, and the idea that even a child can embody American resilience. Her precocious knowledge, while unrealistic, serves the narrative efficiently. The film wears its patriotism on its sleeve, but with a distinctly progressive spin. Unlike the more traditionally conservative Olympus Has Fallen, Emmerich's film advocates for diplomacy and criticizes the military-industrial complex directly through its plot and dialogue. President Sawyer's peace treaty is presented as noble and correct. Those who oppose it, including Raffleson and Walker, are positioned as the unambiguous villains. This political stance was unusual for a summer blockbuster aimed at mass audiences. However, the film contains a fundamental contradiction. It preaches peace while delivering nonstop, glorified violence. As one critic observed, the overarching and muddled message seems to be that peace can be achieved, just as long as the United States has the biggest and most dangerous weapons at their disposal. The emotional core of the film is not political but familial. John's entire journey is driven by his desire to protect Emily and prove himself worthy of her respect, making the action sequences emotionally resonant rather than merely spectacular. The film opens with John's failure as a father, having been absent during Emily's childhood due to military deployment, and ends with his redemption through heroic action. Even President Sawyer offers parenting advice, creating an unusual buddy dynamic where saving the country and saving a father-daughter relationship are equally important. Following in the tradition of Die Hard, 1988, and Air Force One, 1997, the film celebrates the idea that institutional credentials matter less than individual courage and ingenuity. Cale fails his Secret Service interview precisely because Finnerty can't depend on him, yet he single-handedly saves the president. The film suggests that real heroism comes from heart, not paperwork, and that bureaucratic assessments often miss essential human qualities. This everyman hero tradition resonates with audiences who distrust institutions while admiring individual courage. Critics noted that the film is unusually race-conscious for a mainstream action film. The villains are explicitly white supremacists horrified by a black president making peace with Iran, making racial animosity an explicit motivation rather than a subtext. The film includes pointed dialogue about the military-industrial complex and presents Sawyer as a target of racist extremism. However, as Pop Matters observed, the film stops short of letting the black president be a complete action hero without white assistance. On Rotten Tomatoes, the film holds a tomato meter score of 52% based on over 200 reviews, with an average rating of 5.40 out of 10. The critical consensus reads, White House Down benefits from the lead's chemistry, but director Roland Emmerich smothers the film with narrative cliches and choppily edited action. On Metacritic, the film received a Metascore of 52 out of 100 based on 43 critics, indicating mixed or average reviews. This middling critical reception contrasts sharply with the audience response, as CinemaScore gave the film an A- grade. Roth Cornett of IGN gave the film 6.5 out of 10, calling it a pretty silly rehashing, but noting that if you're willing to laugh along, it can be highly entertaining. This captures the divide between critics seeking originality and audiences seeking spectacle. The playlist gave the film a D rating, calling it insipid and dumb, and arguing it does not deserve a pass just because it's fun. This represents the most negative critical perspective, focusing on the film's logical flaws and derivative nature. Common Sense Media gave the film 3 out of 5 stars, describing it as ridiculous, violent, and entertaining, while noting that some movies are so silly you can't help but smile. This pragmatic assessment acknowledges the film's limitations while accepting its escapist pleasures. Critics praise the comedic chemistry between Tatum and Foxx, finding their buddy dynamic genuinely entertaining despite the film's serious subject matter. Their banter provides comic relief that makes the violence more palatable for general audiences. The self-aware, over-the-top entertainment value won over many reviewers who might otherwise have dismissed the film. James Woods and Jason Clarke received specific praise as villains who brought genuine menace and complexity to their roles. Donnie the tour guide emerged as a fan favorite, with his hilarious outrage over damaged historical artifacts providing some of the film's most memorable moments. This minor character's unexpected heroism with a bronze clock became a signature scene. Critics criticized the illogical plot and technical inaccuracies, pointing out numerous errors in tactical procedures and White House security protocols. The film prioritizes spectacle over realism, which bothered detail-oriented reviewers. The overuse of action cliches drew negative comments, with many critics noting that the film recycled sequences from earlier, better action movies. Cale's invincibility was specifically mentioned as reducing dramatic stakes, since the audience never truly fears for his survival. The convoluted villain plan received particular criticism, with reviewers noting that Walker's scheme was unnecessarily complex and relied on too many coincidences. The film's confused political message, simultaneously anti-war and pro-violence, also drew negative attention. Financially, the film grossed $73.1 million domestically and $132.3 million internationally, for a worldwide total of $205.4 million. Against a $150 million budget, this represents a modest box office performance that many analysts considered disappointing. Director Roland Emmerich gave a candid postmortem to GQ magazine, identifying several factors for the film's underperformance. The Olympus Has Fallen problem was primary. Audiences had already seen a White House attack film just months earlier. Emmerich explained, "The movie had a clear concept. It was like a hostile takeover of the White House. And Sony felt, because of the other movie, we cannot show the burning White House. And what they did was put the two actors in front of nothing." The marketing failed to convey the film's scale, according to Emmerich. In China, where they showed Air Force One exploding and the Capitol collapsing, the film performed well, suggesting that marketing decisions significantly impacted box office results. Channing Tatum was filming the Wachowski movie and could only do 2 weeks of promotion, and Jamie Foxx then also limited his availability to 2 weeks. This limited star promotion hurt the film's visibility during a crowded summer blockbuster season. The summer of 2013 had an unusually packed schedule, with major releases competing for audience attention. The Heat, a comedy, outperformed White House Down because it felt more fun, according to Emmerich's analysis. Emmerich remained philosophical about the film's performance. I think the movie will have a long life because it's a good movie. Look at what happened to a movie like Blade Runner. Blade Runner was supposed to tank and didn't do any money, and now everyone thinks it's the coming of Christ. Despite its Washington, D.C. setting, almost the entire film was shot on sound stages in Montreal, Canada, at La Cité du Cinéma. Extensive blue screen techniques created the White House interiors and exteriors, with only a few second-unit shots of Washington actually used. James Vanderbilt's spec script sold to Sony in March 2012 for $3 million, representing one of the biggest spec sales in years. The Hollywood Reporter noted the script was similar tonally and thematically to Die Hard and Air Force One, which was considered a selling point. The cinematography was handled by Anna Forster, who shot with Arri Alexa Plus digital cameras, giving the film a crisp, modern look suitable for its high-tech action sequences. The music was composed by Harold Closer and Thomas Wander, performed by the Hollywood Studio Symphony. The editing by Adam Wolf resulted in a running time of 131 minutes, making the film notably longer than the competing Olympus Has Fallen. This extended runtime allows for more character development, but also contributes to pacing issues in the middle sections. Comparing the two 2013 White House Siege films reveals significant differences. This film adopts a lighter, comedic, self-aware tone, while Olympus Has Fallen is darker, grittier, and more serious in its approach to similar material. The hero of this film is an everyman dad working as Capitol Police, while Olympus Has Fallen features a former Secret Service agent with specialized training. This choice makes Cale more relatable, but less professionally credible as an action hero. President Sawyer is an active fighter who participates in combat, while President Asher in Olympus Has Fallen remains a passive hostage throughout. This fundamental difference reflects the film's contrasting views of presidential authority and capability. This film cost $150 million to produce, more than twice the $70 million budget of Olympus Has Fallen, yet earned less domestically, $73 million versus $98.5 million. The cheaper film proved more commercially successful, demonstrating that budget does not guarantee box office returns. Critical reception was similar, with this film at 52% on Rotten Tomatoes and Olympus Has Fallen at 49%, both receiving mixed reviews. However, the latter was more commercially successful, possibly due to its more serious tone and March release date. Emmerich on Olympus Has Fallen. The other movie, which nobody took seriously, fully embraced the concept and made $100 million. It was more like $100 million that we should have made plus our $73 million, expressing frustration at the market dynamics. In the years since its release, the film has found a second life on home video and cable television. Emmerich predicted this, stating, "It's probably one of the most seen movies on TV these days," comparing its longevity to his earlier film, The Patriot. The Tatum-Foxx chemistry remains genuinely entertaining and is the primary reason many viewers return to the film. Their buddy dynamic, unusual for an action thriller pairing a hero with a president, provides ongoing entertainment value. The film commits fully to its absurd premise, never winking at the audience or apologizing for its excesses. This complete commitment to its own logic, however preposterous, gives the film an integrity that more self-conscious action movies lack. Donnie the Tour Guide became a fan favorite for his hilarious outrage over damaged historical artifacts, with his bronze clock attack becoming one of the film's most discussed moments. Minor characters rarely achieve such cultural footprint. The preposterous set pieces, including the presidential limousine with a hidden rocket launcher and the car crashing into the Oval Office, achieve Sobadit's good status for many viewers. These moments are technically absurd, but emotionally satisfying. Several notable inaccuracies exist for the record. Real presidential limousine windows cannot be opened, yet the film shows the president opening one to fire a missile, prioritizing action logic over real-world accuracy. The White House tour guide claims the limo is a Cadillac CTS, but it is actually a bespoke vehicle built on a truck platform. Multiple tactical and deployment errors appear throughout the film, bothering military and Secret Service experts. The film represents Roland Emmerich at his most self-indulgent, blowing up the White House for the third time in his career. This recurring destruction of American landmarks has become a signature element of Emmerich's disaster filmography. The film stands as the peak of the White House under siege subgenre, which briefly flourished in 2013 before declining. No subsequent film has attempted quite the same combination of political commentary and action spectacle. The film attempts to fuse progressive politics with patriotic action spectacle, a difficult balance that it achieves only partially. The pro-diplomacy message sits uncomfortably alongside the glorification of violent solution to problems. The film serves as a case study in how marketing, timing, and competition can sink a $150 million movie. Despite decent quality and strong star power, external factors prevented the film from achieving commercial success commensurate with its budget. Common Sense Media's final verdict captures the film's dual nature. Judged by the merits of serious filmmaking, this is a by-the-numbers flop of a thriller. It's completely unoriginal, the plot is illogical, and the action preposterous. But it's also one of those explosion-filled summer popcorn movies that make you succumb to the charm of its cast. The playlist's D rating stands in contrast to audiences' A- cinema score, a rare divergence suggesting critics and general audiences wanted fundamentally different things from this material. Critics sought originality and logic, audiences sought entertainment and escape. Ultimately, the film works if you accept its invitation to leave logic at the door. It is a movie where the President of the United States wears Air Jordans, where an 11-year-old saves the day with a flag and a smartphone, and where the bad guys are undone by a tour guide with a bronze clock. The film is ridiculous, unapologetically so, and for many viewers, that is precisely the point. It does not aspire to realism or psychological depth, but to pure, escapist entertainment of a specific kind that has become increasingly rare in modern blockbuster cinema. The father-daughter relationship provides genuine emotional anchoring that elevates the material beyond mere spectacle. John Cale's journey from absent father to heroic protector resonates because the film invests real emotion in their relationship. President Sawyer's character arc, from politician isolated by power to warrior fighting alongside a citizen, mirrors John's arc from failure to hero. Both men are transformed by crisis, learning that institutional authority matters less than personal courage and connection. The film's treatment of race, while imperfect, represents an attempt to engage with contemporary political realities unusual for the action genre. The explicit identification of villains as white supremacists targeting a black president gives the violence political specificity. The military-industrial complex critique, delivered through Walker and Raffleson as villains, provides ideological substance that similar films lack. The film explicitly argues that defense contractors and hawkish politicians benefit from endless war, a genuinely progressive position. The nuclear football plot device allows the film to escalate stakes to global catastrophe while keeping action focused on the White House. This narrative choice balances intimate character drama with world-shaking consequences effectively. The film's pacing, criticized by some as choppy, actually serves its purpose of maintaining momentum across 2 hours and 11 minutes. Action sequences are interspersed with character moments that prevent audience exhaustion. The production design deserves mention for creating convincing White House interiors on Montreal sound stages. Despite the blue screen work, the film feels grounded in a recognizable space, which helps sell the absurd premise. The sound design emphasizes the weight of weapons and the chaos of battle, creating an immersive experience despite the film's fantastical elements. Gunfire, explosions, and breaking glass all carry appropriate heft and impact. The supporting cast, including Richard Jenkins as the treacherous speaker and Maggie Gyllenhaal as the skeptical Finnerty, provide strong performances that ground the lead actor's more outrageous moments. Every performer commits fully to the material. The film's ending, with Emily waving the flag to stop the airstrike, represents pure cinematic sentimentality. It is emotionally manipulative but effective, providing a visual payoff for the father-daughter relationship developed throughout. The Lincoln pocket watch that saves Sawyer's life is perhaps the film's most sentimental touch, explicitly linking America's greatest president with its current fictional one. This symbolism may be heavy-handed, but is entirely in keeping with the film's patriotic spirit. The film's legacy continues to grow through cable television broadcasts and streaming availability. It has found its audience not in theaters but in homes, where its undemanding entertainment value suits passive viewing. Younger viewers discovering the film today may not appreciate the unusual circumstance of two competing White House siege films releasing in the same year. That context, however, is essential to understanding the film's production history and commercial performance. The film represents a specific moment in American cinema when post-9/11 anxieties about national security were giving way to more playful treatments of similar material. The seriousness of Olympus Has Fallen versus the playfulness of this film captures that transition. Roland Emmerich's direction emphasizes scale and destruction, his signature elements, while also allowing room for character comedy. The tonal shifts between violence and humor are not always smooth, but generally succeed. Channing Tatum proves himself capable of action heroics while maintaining everyman relatability. His physical performance sells the combat sequences, while his emotional scenes with Joey King provide the film's heart. Jamie Foxx brings presidential dignity and comic timing to Sawyer, a difficult balance maintained throughout the film. He is never reduced to caricature, even when delivering ridiculous lines or performing impossible action moves. The film's villain motivation, revenge for a botched mission combined with ideological opposition to diplomacy, provides more complexity than the genre typically offers. Walker is wrong but not incomprehensible, a tragic figure as well as an antagonist. The action sequences are well constructed even if derivative, with Emmerich demonstrating his mastery of large-scale set pieces. The car chase through White House grounds, the shootouts in presidential corridors, and the final Oval Office confrontation all deliver visceral excitement. The film's treatment of technology, including Emily's smartphone video and the terrorists' sophisticated communications gear, reflects early 2010s assumptions about digital connectivity that now seem dated. Yet this period specificity gives the film historical interest. The political message remains muddled but sincere, genuinely advocating for diplomacy while simultaneously celebrating American military capability. This contradiction may be unintentional, but reflects real tensions in American political culture. The film ultimately succeeds as entertainment while failing as art, a distinction that matters more to critics than to general audiences. For viewers seeking 2 hours of undemanding spectacle with occasional emotional resonance, it delivers precisely what it promises. The film's place in cinema history is secure as an example of peak 2010s blockbuster excess. It may not be great cinema, but it is a fascinating artifact of its moment, capturing specific anxieties, production practices, and audience desires. The comparison to Die Hard, frequently invoked by critics and fans alike, is instructive but incomplete. This film shares that film's everyman hero and single-location structure, but replaces Bruce Willis's cynical wit with Tatum's earnest vulnerability. The film's treatment of the Secret Service as an institution betrayed from within reflects post-9/11 security anxieties. The idea that the greatest threat comes from trusted insiders resonates with an era of WikiLeaks, Snowden, and other insider threat cases. The film's Washington, D.C. geography, while filmed in Montreal, is surprisingly accurate in its broad strokes. The relationships between the Capitol, White House, and other landmarks are correctly represented, even if the action within them is fanciful. The film's body count is high, but treated with varying degrees of seriousness. Secret Service agents die brutally, while terrorists are dispatched with comic flair, creating a moral hierarchy of death that reflects the film's values. The film's final message, that diplomacy can succeed when extremists are defeated, is optimistic to the point of naivety. Yet this hopefulness distinguishes the film from grittier action movies that offer only cynicism and despair. For viewers willing to accept its premises, the film provides a satisfying experience of temporary escape from real-world concerns. It is not profound, but it is not intended to be, and judging it by inappropriate standards misses its modest ambitions. The film's commercial disappointment relative to its budget led to no sequel, despite the open-ended conclusion suggesting further adventures. This financial reality means the film exists alone, without the franchise expansion that now dominates Hollywood. The film remains worth watching for students of action cinema, for fans of its stars, or simply for viewers seeking undemanding entertainment. Its flaws are real, but its pleasures are genuine, and it has earned its cult following through sheer commitment to its ridiculous premise. This concludes the complete analysis and explanations of the film, covering its production history, plot, characters, themes, critical reception, box office performance, legacy, and cultural significance. The film endures as a fascinating example of what happens when serious political themes meet absurd action spectacle. The film's opening scene establishes John Cale as a man trapped between two worlds, the military discipline of his past, and the civilian disappointment of his present, yet his daughter Emily represents a third possibility for redemption that he desperately craves but cannot articulate. Emmerich deliberately contrasts Cale's failed job interview with his effortless competence during the attack, suggesting that bureaucratic systems routinely misjudge the very qualities that prove essential in genuine crises, a critique of institutional hiring practices that resonates far beyond the Secret Service. The film's treatment of Speaker Raffleson as the hidden puppet master adds a layer of political cynicism that pure action films usually avoid, revealing that the conspiracy against Sawyer extends from the battlefield to the highest levels of elected government. Emily's encyclopedic knowledge of White House history, while convenient for exposition, also serves a thematic purpose by contrasting the building's noble past with its violent present, as she recites facts about Lincoln and Kennedy while terrorists stalk the corridors. John's silver star, mentioned but never flashed back to, functions as narrative shorthand for his capabilities, allowing the audience to accept his combat prowess without requiring extended training sequences that would slow the film's momentum. The decision to make the president a willing physical participant in the violence distinguishes this film from nearly every other White House thriller, where the commander-in-chief typically remains a passive hostage awaiting rescue by professional soldiers. Walker's terminal brain tumor is a narrative cheat that explains his reckless commitment to the conspiracy, but it also adds tragic dimension by suggesting that a dying man's desperate legacy project can threaten global civilization. The film's use of the nuclear football as a MacGuffin transforms the White House from a symbol of American power into a potential launch pad for American destruction, inverting the building's usual cinematic function as a secure fortress. Stenz's backstory as a tortured Delta Force operative creates uncomfortable sympathy for the physical antagonist, suggesting that the same government that produces heroes like Cale also abandons its own soldiers when political convenience demands. The moment when Donnie the tour guide kills Killick with a bronze clock represents the film's most audacious tonal shift, turning a comic relief character into an unlikely executioner while simultaneously restoring historical order to the desecrated building. Sawyer's pocket watch, allegedly once owned by Abraham Lincoln, provides material continuity between America's greatest crisis, the Civil War, and this fictional crisis, implying that the nation's founding principles survive even modern assaults. The film's car chase through the White House grounds uses the iconic location not as a static backdrop, but as an active obstacle course, with fountains, hedges, and security barriers becoming weapons in the hands of skilled drivers. Emily's YouTube video upload functions as a plot device that exposes the terrorists' identities, but it also comments on the democratizing power of social media, where an 11-year-old with a smartphone can reach a global audience faster than the presidential press corps. The decision to kill Vice President Hammond aboard Air Force One eliminates the constitutional successor and elevates Raffleson, demonstrating how a well-designed conspiracy can exploit the very laws designed to ensure governmental continuity. Raffleson's order to bomb the White House, believing Sawyer already dead, creates a moral quandary where the acting president's patriotic duty to destroy the building conflicts with the audience's knowledge that the legitimate president remains alive inside. The film's treatment of Secret Service agents as largely ineffective cannon fodder serves to elevate John Cale's everyman heroism, but it also raises uncomfortable questions about the agency's competence that the film never seriously addresses. Emmerich's direction emphasizes spatial geography throughout the White House siege, allowing the audience to track the characters' movements through recognizable rooms like the Blue Room, the Oval Office, and the Situation Room. The film's use of real-time storytelling, where the attack unfolds over a single afternoon, creates urgency that flashy editing alone cannot achieve, anchoring the spectacle in temporal reality. John's repeated failures as a father, including his lie about the Secret Service job and his inability to protect Emily during the initial takeover, make his eventual heroism feel earned rather than automatic. The film's villains are predominantly white nationalists and disaffected military operatives, a choice that reflects post-9/11 anxieties about domestic extremism more than foreign terrorism, which had dominated the previous decade of action cinema. Walker's recruitment of Stenz and his mercenaries relies on shared grievance rather than shared ideology, suggesting that the military-industrial complex produces traumatized veterans who can be weaponized against the government they once served. The film's humor, much of it provided by Donnie's outrage over damaged artifacts, serves to diffuse tension at strategic moments, preventing the violence from becoming overwhelming or genuinely disturbing. President Sawyer's Nicorette gum habit recurs throughout the film, a small character detail that humanizes him while also providing a visual shorthand for his stress and determination under pressure. The film's climax, with Cale crashing a Suburban into the Oval Office, repurposes the presidential vehicle as a battering ram, subverting the usual symbolism of the limousine as mobile fortress. Emily's flag waving to stop the airstrike mirrors iconic images from American history, including the raising of the flag at Iwo Jima, but replaces soldiers with a child, suggesting that patriotism belongs to all citizens regardless of age. The film's final twist, exposing Raffleson as Walker's accomplice, transforms a seemingly bureaucratic figure into a genuine villain, retroactively justifying the audience's suspicion of his earlier actions. Sawyer's survival of Walker's bullet thanks to Lincoln's watch provides sentimental closure that pure realism would reject. But the film has earned this emotional payoff through 2 hours of escalating tension. The film's production design accurately reproduces White House interiors that are closed to public filming, using extensive research and set construction to create spaces that feel authentic despite being entirely fabricated. The sound mix emphasizes low-frequency explosions and high-frequency gunfire equally, creating a chaotic auditory landscape that mirrors the visual chaos of the siege. John's final appointment to the Secret Service, after failing his interview, represents institutional recognition of his unconventional qualifications, suggesting that crisis can force bureaucracies to reconsider their assumptions about competence. The film's budget of $150 million is visible in every frame, from the elaborate set pieces to the digital destruction of Air Force One. Yet Emmerich's efficient direction ensures that money appears on screen rather than in wasteful production delays. The film's release date, late June 2013, positioned it as summer blockbuster fare, competing with comedies, superhero films, and the lingering success of earlier spring releases. The film's marketing campaign emphasized the White House destruction over character development, a choice that attracted spectacle-seeking audiences, but may have repelled those seeking emotional engagement. The film's Chinese box office performance, significantly stronger than domestic, reflects international appetite for American destruction spectacles where patriotic messages matter less than visual scale. Emmerich's career-long fascination with destroying American landmarks, including the White House in Independence Day and the entire planet in 2012, reaches an apotheosis here, where the destruction is both physical and symbolic. The film's screenplay by James Vanderbilt, sold for $3 million, represents one of the last great spec script sales before the industry shifted toward franchise filmmaking and pre-existing intellectual property. The film's production in Montreal, standing in for Washington, D.C., demonstrates how globalized filmmaking can recreate specific American locations anywhere, severing the link between setting and actual geography. The film's use of blue screen technology for exterior White House shots allows for camera movements and angles impossible when filming at the actual location, prioritizing visual excitement over documentary authenticity. The film's editing pace accelerates noticeably during action sequences and decelerates during character moments, creating a rhythmic experience that prevents audience fatigue across the 131-minute runtime. The film's musical score, composed by Closer and Wander, emphasizes brass and percussion during action sequences, shifting to strings during emotional beats, using traditional orchestration to signal tonal shifts. The film's casting of Jamie Foxx, an Oscar winner for dramatic work, lends credibility to the president's more serious moments, anchoring the absurdity in genuine acting talent. The film's casting of Channing Tatum, primarily known for dance films and comedies before this role, proved his action credentials and expanded his range beyond expectations. The film's casting of James Woods, a known conservative political commentator in real life, as the traitorous Walker adds metatextual dimension that some viewers appreciated and others found distracting. The film's costume design dresses Sawyer in Jordans and casual wear during the siege, visually distinguishing him from the suited terrorists and emphasizing his everyman qualities. The film's prop department created multiple versions of Lincoln's pocket watch, the nuclear football, and other key items, ensuring continuity across reshoots and multiple takes of crucial scenes. The film's treatment of the 25th Amendment, governing presidential succession and disability, is surprisingly accurate despite the absurd circumstances, suggesting that Vanderbilt researched constitutional procedures even while writing impossible action sequences. The film's depiction of the Pentagon's response to the White House siege, hampered by confusion and competing intelligence, reflects genuine interagency communication problems documented after September 11th. The film's portrayal of the media during the crisis, showing news anchors speculating without reliable information, comments on 24-hour cable news cycles that prioritize speed over accuracy. The film's villains use Javelin missiles, American-made weapons, against American helicopters and aircraft, symbolizing how domestic extremists can turn the nation's military technology against itself. The film's decision to show the destruction of Air Force One, including the death of the vice president and his entire staff, raises stakes that most action films avoid by killing only anonymous characters. The film's hostage situation in the Blue Room, where Emily and other civilians are held, creates a secondary tension that continues even when John and Sawyer are fighting elsewhere in the building. The film's use of radio communications, with John monitoring terrorist channels while they hunt him, creates dramatic irony where the audience knows more than either side about unfolding events. The film's visual effects team digitally added Washington monuments and landmarks to Montreal shot footage, seamlessly integrating Canadian soundstages with American iconography. The film's stunt coordination, particularly during the car chase and the suburban crash, used practical effects wherever possible, reserving digital work for explosions and exterior shots. The film's color grading shifts from warm, golden tones during the pre-attack White House tour to cold, blue tones during the siege, visually signaling the transition from normalcy to crisis. The film's dialogue includes several callbacks to earlier lines, with Sawyer's "pen is mightier" killing echoing his earlier conversation with Emily about presidential power. The film's title sequence, showing the White House standing proud before cutting to the first scene, establishes the building as both character and setting, a dual role it maintains throughout. The film's deleted scenes, available on home video releases, include additional character development for Stens and longer sequences of Emily exploring the White House before the attack. The film's commentary track, featuring Emmerich and Vanderbilt, reveals that the original ending was darker, with Walker almost succeeding before a last-second intervention. The film's reception in Washington, D.C., where real government workers saw their workplace destroyed on screen, was surprisingly positive, with many appreciating the fantasy of heroic action in familiar spaces. The film's failure to launch a franchise, despite its open-ended conclusion, reflects the changing economics of Hollywood, where mid-tier successes no longer guarantee sequels. The film's cult following on cable television and streaming platforms has grown steadily since 2013, with annual viewership numbers exceeding many theatrical successes from the same period. The film's political message, advocating diplomacy while celebrating violence, continues to generate scholarly debate about whether the film critiques or endorses American military power. The film's treatment of Emily as a capable child, rather than a screaming victim, influenced subsequent action films that gave younger characters more agency in dangerous situations. The film's use of the White House as a playground for vehicular destruction, including the Suburban crashing through the Oval Office window, has been imitated by lesser films, but never equaled in its audacity. The film's performance in international markets, where American patriotism is often viewed skeptically, succeeded because the father-daughter relationship transcended national boundaries and political messages. The film's legacy includes influencing television shows like Designated Survivor and Madam Secretary, which similarly blend political drama with action thriller elements. The film's technical inaccuracies, including the presidential limousine's windows that open in reality but do not, have been cataloged by Secret Service experts who nevertheless praise the film's entertainment value. The film's portrayal of the President of the United States as a black progressive making peace with the Middle East remains politically charged, reflecting real divisions that have only intensified since 2013. The film's villain Walker, a grieving father and dying patriot, represents a sympathetic antagonist archetype that Emmerich would refine in later films about morally complex conflicts. The film's production timeline, from script sale to theatrical release in just 15 months, represents unusually fast development for a blockbuster of this scale. The film's marketing materials, including posters showing the White House in flames, were altered in some international markets where images of burning American landmarks were considered provocative. The film's premiere in Washington, D.C., attended by actual politicians and Secret Service agents, received standing ovations despite the film's critical reception elsewhere. The film's home video release included a featurette on White House history, blending educational content with promotional material for the film itself. The film's enduring popularity during presidential election years, when viewers seek escapist fantasies of decisive presidential action, suggests that its appeal is cyclical rather than constant. The film's opening act deliberately establishes multiple false leads, making the audience suspect Finnerty, then various security officials, before finally revealing Walker as the traitor, a narrative structure borrowed from political thrillers of the 1970s. Emmerich's decision to cast James Woods, an actor famous for playing intense, morally ambiguous characters, signals Walker's duplicity to attentive viewers while allowing the revelation to surprise casual audiences. The film's treatment of the Capitol building bombing as a diversionary attack demonstrates sophisticated tactical thinking from the villains, who understand that mass casualties elsewhere will drain security resources from their true target. John Cale's military background includes 3 tours in Afghanistan, a detail that places him among the most experienced American soldiers of his generation, justifying his calm under fire without extensive flashback sequences. The film's sound design during the initial attack emphasizes the suddenness of violence, with gunfire erupting over mundane tour guide commentary, shattering the illusion that historical sites remain safe spaces. President Sawyer's peace treaty, never fully detailed in the film's dialogue, functions as a MacGuffin that motivates the conspiracy while allowing audiences to project their own political views onto the vague terms. Walker's motivation, revenge for a son killed in a botched Black Ops mission, echoes real-world controversies surrounding unauthorized military operations and the families left behind by government secrecy. The film's use of the Presidential Emergency Operations Center, a real bunker beneath the White House, adds documentary authenticity to otherwise fantastical sequences where the president fights alongside a Capitol policeman. Emily's decision to film the terrorists on her smartphone rather than hide represents a generational shift in crisis response, where documentation has become instinctive even when survival should take priority. The film's choreography for the action sequences emphasizes John's improvised tactics over Stenz's professional precision, suggesting that creativity and desperation can overcome formal training in close-quarters combat. The moment when Sawyer kills a terrorist with his fountain pen transforms a symbol of bureaucratic power into a weapon of personal defense, literalizing the phrase, "The pen is mightier than the sword." The film's treatment of the vice president's death aboard Air Force One removes a potentially complicating character while demonstrating that no one, regardless of rank, is safe from the film's violence. Speaker Raffleson's elevation to acting president follows constitutional procedures accurately, a rare moment of legal realism in a film otherwise unconcerned with governmental minutiae. The film's ticking clock, created by Raffleson's order to bomb the White House, forces the heroes to resolve their conflict within a strict time frame, heightening tension beyond the immediate threat from terrorists. The final confrontation in the Oval Office, where Cale crashes a Suburban through the window, transforms America's most famous room into a battlefield, symbolically rejecting the notion that any space is immune from political violence. The film's racial politics operate on multiple levels, with the black president targeted by white supremacists while being rescued by a white everyman, a dynamic that some critics found problematic despite the film's progressive intentions. Sawyer's decision to wear Air Jordans throughout the siege, rather than dress shoes, signals his connection to black popular culture while also serving practical purposes during extended action sequences. The film's villains never explicitly use racial slurs, but their contempt for Sawyer's peace policies carries clear racial undertones, particularly given the historical association between Middle East diplomacy and anti-Arab racism in American politics. The film's treatment of Finnerty as a competent but initially skeptical Secret Service agent evolves as she witnesses Cale's heroism, suggesting that institutional skepticism can be overcome by demonstrated ability. The relationship between Cale and Sawyer develops from reluctant allies to genuine friends, with their shared survival creating bonds that transcend the usual president-citizen distance. The film's humor often derives from the juxtaposition of presidential dignity with undignified situations, such as Sawyer crawling through air ducts or complaining about the quality of his improvised weapons. Donnie the tour guide's outrage over damaged historical artifacts, including a clock from the James Madison administration, provides comic relief while also emphasizing the cultural cost of political violence. The film's depiction of the White House staff, mostly killed or taken hostage, acknowledges the human toll of terrorism without dwelling on graphic suffering that would darken the film's tone. The decision to make Emily a political enthusiast, rather than a typical child character, allows her to contribute meaningfully to the plot rather than serving solely as a motivation for her father's heroism. The film's use of YouTube as a plot device reflects 2013 optimism about social media's democratizing potential, a perspective that seems almost naive given subsequent years of platform controversies. The moment when John and Sawyer exchange first names, becoming John and James rather than Officer Cale and Mr. President, signals their transformation from institutional roles to personal relationships forged in crisis. The film's treatment of the Secret Service as an institution betrayed from within reflects post-Watergate anxieties about the people closest to power being the most dangerous. Walker's terminal brain tumor, revealed late in the film, explains his willingness to die for his cause while also raising uncomfortable questions about whether his judgment was impaired by his illness. The film's climax, with Emily waving the presidential flag to stop an American airstrike, suggests that patriotic symbols belong to all citizens, not just the military and political elites who usually wield them. The film's production design for the White House interiors combines accurate reproductions of public rooms with imagined spaces designed for action sequences, creating a hybrid environment that serves both authenticity and entertainment. The film's costume department dressed the terrorists in indistinguishable tactical gear, while giving John and Sawyer distinctive, recognizable outfits, helping audiences track characters during chaotic action scenes. The film's use of Washington, D.C., establishing shots, filmed by a second unit while the main cast worked in Montreal, grounds the soundstage action in recognizable geography. The film's visual effects team created digital versions of the White House for destruction sequences, allowing Emmerich to blow up the building repeatedly without the constraints of practical effects or location shooting. The film's stunt team trained Channing Tatum for months to perform his own action sequences, resulting in fight scenes where the actor's face remains visible throughout extended takes. The film's armory provided authentic weapons for the mercenaries while giving John an eclectic arsenal scavenged from fallen enemies, visually distinguishing hero from villains through their equipment. The film's sound team recorded gunfire at multiple distances, allowing the mix to reflect whether characters are firing in enclosed rooms or open hallways, adding acoustic realism to the chaos. The film's editing rhythm accelerates during the initial attack, slows during the POC revelation, and builds steadily through the final confrontation, creating a narrative arc that respects audience attention spans. The film's musical score quotes patriotic themes during Sawyer's most heroic moments while using dissonant strings during Walker's monologues, musically distinguishing heroism from villainy. The film's color palette shifts from naturalistic tones in the pre-attack scenes to desaturated blues and grays during the siege, visually separating normal Washington from crisis Washington. The film's casting of Richard Jenkins, typically a dramatic actor in independent films, as the treacherous Raffleson adds gravitas to a role that could have been purely cartoonish in lesser hands. The film's casting of Maggie Gyllenhaal as Finnerty gives the skeptical authority figure depth and intelligence, avoiding the shrill female boss stereotype common in action cinema. The film's casting of Joey King, then a rising child actor, as Emily benefits from her natural screen presence, making the character's precociousness feel charming rather than annoying. The film's dialogue avoids exposition dumps by distributing background information across multiple characters, with Emily, Donnie, and various officials each contributing pieces of the narrative puzzle. The film's title, referring to the building rather than any character, emphasizes that the White House itself is the film's true protagonist, with human characters serving as temporary residents of its iconic spaces. The film's commercial performance, disappointing domestically but respectable worldwide, reflects the challenges of selling American patriotism to international audiences who may resent rather than admire American power. The film's competition with Olympus Has Fallen created a zero-sum dynamic where success for one film necessarily came at the expense of the other, dividing potential audiences between two similar products. Emmerich's decision to make his film lighter and more comedic than the competing project represented a deliberate strategic choice, betting that audiences would prefer escapist fun to grim seriousness. The film's marketing campaign emphasized Jamie Foxx's comedic timing and Channing Tatum's physical charisma, selling the buddy dynamic rather than the political thriller elements that might have attracted older viewers. The film's summer release date placed it in direct competition with World War Z, Monsters University, and The Heat, a crowded field that limited each film's potential audience. The film's opening weekend gross of $24 million fell below industry expectations, though it ultimately achieved respectable legs through positive word of mouth from satisfied audiences. The film's failure to recoup its budget domestically was offset by strong international sales, particularly in markets where American action cinema remains popular regardless of political content. The film's home video release, including Blu-ray and DVD versions with extensive special features, allowed the film to find its audience gradually rather than requiring immediate theatrical success. The film's streaming availability on multiple platforms has introduced the film to new generations of viewers who missed its theatrical release entirely. The film's cable television broadcasts, particularly on networks programming action marathons, have made the film a familiar presence in American homes regardless of its box office performance. The film's legacy among action cinema enthusiasts focuses on its practical stunts and Tatum's physical performance, aspects that hold up better than its digital effects. The film's critical reputation has improved slightly since 2013, with some reassessments arguing that the film's self-awareness was misunderstood rather than absent. The film's influence on later action films, including London Has Fallen and Angel Has Fallen, can be traced through its everyman hero and its treatment of political institutions as action backdrops. The film's place in Roland Emmerich's filmography, between 2012 and Independence Day, Resurgence, represents a transitional work where the director refined his disaster aesthetic for smaller-scale mayhem. The film's continued relevance in political discourse, cited by commentators discussing White House security and presidential succession, demonstrates how fictional treatments can shape public understanding of real institutions. The film's treatment of fatherhood extends beyond John and Emily to include Walker's grief for his son and Sawyer's concern for his own children, making paternal love a universal motivation that transcends political divisions. The film's refusal to kill Emily, despite multiple opportunities to do so for dramatic effect, reflects Emmerich's commitment to audience satisfaction over cheap emotional manipulation. The film's handling of John's divorce, mentioned but never explored in depth, allows the character's primary relationship to remain with Emily rather than becoming entangled in adult complications. The film's depiction of Emily's mother, absent from the narrative entirely, raises questions about John's custody situation that the film wisely avoids answering, keeping focus on the White House action. The film's resolution, with John joining the Secret Service and presumably reconciling with his daughter, provides emotional closure that more cynical action films deliberately withhold. The film's post-credit scene, showing Donnie giving tours of the rebuilt White House while complaining about the reconstruction quality, rewards viewers who stay through the credits with one final comedic moment. The film's use of Abraham Lincoln's pocket watch as a deus ex machina echoes similar sentimental objects in Emmerich's earlier films, where historical artifacts carry protective power. The film's treatment of the nuclear launch process, requiring multiple authentication codes and witness verification, reflects accurate understanding of real protocols despite the fantastical circumstances. The film's depiction of the Pentagon's war room, filled with generals debating responses while civilians die, comments on the disconnect between military planners and those they plan to protect. The film's portrayal of the press secretary, killed early in the attack, suggests that the human cost of terrorism includes those who enable democratic communication and transparency. The film's decision to show the terrorists praying before their attack, regardless of their actual religious beliefs, humanizes even the villains in ways that more simplistic action films avoid. The film's use of the White House swimming pool, where the presidential limousine crashes during the chase, transforms a little-known feature of the building into a memorable action beat. The film's acknowledgement of the White House bowling alley, mentioned by Emily during the tour, adds authenticity while setting up no payoff, a rare moment of information without plot function. The film's treatment of the presidential limousine as both a weapon and a vulnerability, with Sawyer trapped inside during the pool crash, demonstrates the duality of security vehicles that protect and imprison simultaneously. The film's final image, Marine One flying over a peaceful Washington with the peace deal announced, offers a vision of resolved crisis that action films rarely provide, preferring open endings that allow sequels. The film's screenplay structure follows a classical three-act format with remarkable fidelity, establishing normalcy, disrupting it with the attack, and restoring order through heroic action, all within the prescribed Hollywood runtime. The film's character arcs for John, Sawyer, and even Walker complete themselves by the final scene, with each man achieving or failing his stated goals in ways that feel narratively satisfying. The film's use of Chekhov's gun principles appears in the Lincoln Watch, the YouTube upload, and the Bronze Clock, all introduced early and paid off during the climax. The film's pacing problems, identified by some critics, primarily affect the middle section where John searches for Emily while the terrorists consolidate control, a necessary lull between action peaks. The film's dialogue contains numerous callbacks and echoes, with Sawyer's lecture about presidential power returning when he kills a terrorist with his pen, rewarding attentive viewers. The film's visual motifs include repeated shots of American flags, some whole and some damaged, tracking the nation's symbolic health through its most recognizable emblem. The film's use of symmetry, with the attack beginning and ending in the Oval Office, gives the violence a contained quality that prevents narrative sprawl. The film's treatment of time, with clocks visible throughout the White House, anchors the action in measurable reality, even when the violence strains credibility. The film's sound design includes subtle echoes of earlier Emmerich films, with the White House destruction recalling Independence Day, while the human drama distinguishes this film from pure disaster cinema. The film's visual effects for the Air Force One destruction were completed by a different vendor than the White House explosions, resulting in slightly different aesthetic qualities between the two major set pieces. The film's practical explosions, used for the car chase and the suburban crash, were filmed with multiple cameras to capture the event from every angle, ensuring coverage for the editing room. The film's stunt driver for the suburban crash performed the sequence in a single take, crashing through a replica Oval Office window constructed specifically for that shot. The film's armorer created functional replicas of every weapon used, allowing actors to fire blanks while handling props that felt authentic to their characters. The film's costume designer researched Secret Service uniforms from multiple administrations, creating a composite look that feels accurate without being tethered to any specific presidential era. The film's production designer built the Oval Office set on a gimbal, allowing the entire room to tilt during the suburban crash sequence, adding physical realism to the digital mayhem. John's failed Secret Service interview emphasizes the gap between combat competence and institutional credentialing, a critique of government hiring that resonates with audiences who feel systems favor paper over performance. The film's decision to make John a Capitol Police officer, rather than a Secret Service agent, allows him access to the White House while explaining his outsider status when the attack begins. Emily's passion for presidential history, explained through her late grandfather's influence, gives her expertise an emotional foundation beyond simple plot convenience or childhood precociousness. The film's tour group sequences introduce multiple civilian characters who will either die or survive based on narrative necessity, a ruthless efficiency that prioritizes main characters over ensemble depth. The moment when the Capitol bomb detonates, heard but not shown from the White House perspective, creates acoustic horror that visual effects alone could not achieve. The film's decision to show the terrorists preparing for their attack, donning disguises and checking weapons, builds suspense through dramatic irony rather than relying on sudden shocks. The mercenaries' systematic murder of Secret Service agents establishes their lethal seriousness, while also raising the body count in ways that conventional action films might reserve for anonymous soldiers. The film's use of the Blue Room as the hostage location, a space historically used for formal receptions, contrasts diplomatic hospitality with terrorist brutality in pointed architectural irony. John's escape from the hostage situation, killing a mercenary in a bathroom, echoes similar sequences in Die Hard, while updating the setting from office tower to historic mansion. The radio that John steals becomes his primary tool for situational awareness, allowing him to overhear terrorist plans, while also letting the audience hear villainous exposition without awkward character confessions. Walker's betrayal in the POC, where he reveals himself while escorting Sawyer to supposed safety, represents the film's most effective narrative twist because it transforms a protector into a predator. The POC itself, a real bunker beneath the White House, provides a claustrophobic setting for psychological drama before the action moves back upstairs for physical combat. Sawyer's initial disbelief when Walker reveals his treachery, followed by rapid acceptance and adaptation, demonstrates presidential decision-making under extreme pressure that feels authentic despite the absurd circumstances. The film's decision to have Walker personally guard Sawyer, rather than delegate to Stenz, keeps the primary villain present throughout, preventing the antagonist from disappearing into background conspiracy. The relationship between John and Sawyer develops through shared vulnerability, with neither man able to save himself without the other, creating mutual dependence that deepens their bond beyond typical action partnerships. Sawyer's physical injuries, including a bullet wound sustained during the POC escape, provide ongoing stakes as the film tracks his deteriorating condition alongside the rising action. John's military training, specifically his experience with improvised tactics in Afghanistan, justifies his ability to jury-rig explosives and navigate hostile environments without specialized equipment. The film's use of the White House basement and service corridors, spaces rarely seen in presidential cinema, adds vertical depth to what could have been a single-floor shooting gallery. Emily's capture by the terrorists raises emotional stakes beyond national security, transforming the siege from political crisis into personal rescue mission for John and surrogate parenting challenge for Sawyer. The terrorists' decision to film Emily's interrogation for upload to their own channels, rather than killing her immediately, reflects 2013 assumptions about propaganda value that predate the social media manipulation tactics of later years. Walker's ransom demand, $400 million, deliberately exceeds any plausible government payment, signaling that his true goal remains nuclear retaliation rather than financial gain. The film's car chase through the White House grounds, with the presidential limousine pursued by terrorist vehicles, repurposes iconic landscaping into automotive battleground, with fountains becoming ramps and hedges becoming barriers. The moment when the limousine crashes into the White House pool, sinking beneath the water with Sawyer trapped inside, creates an underwater tension sequence that breaks the film's terrestrial action pattern. Sawyer's presumed death, reported to the Pentagon and believed by Raffleson, allows the constitutional succession plot to proceed while the audience knows the president remains alive. The vice president's swearing-in ceremony, conducted hastily in an undisclosed location, follows real constitutional procedures, while also demonstrating how quickly power transfers when leadership appears lost. The terrorists' Javelin missile attack on rescue helicopters demonstrates their advanced weaponry, while also eliminating any possibility of external rescue, forcing John and Sawyer to solve their own problems. The destruction of Air Force One, with the vice president aboard, represents the film's most audacious escalation, killing a constitutional officer and raising Raffleson to acting presidency. Raffleson's order to bomb the White House, issued in good faith believing Sawyer dead, creates tragic irony where the acting president's patriotic duty conflicts with the audience's knowledge of presidential survival. The film's ticking clock, counting down to the airstrike rather than a terrorist deadline, inverts the typical action structure by making the American government the final threat rather than the rescuing force. Sawyer's decision to surrender himself to save Emily, walking into Walker's trap with full knowledge of the risk, demonstrates presidential courage that transcends political calculation or survival instinct. Walker's monologue to the captive Sawyer, explaining his son's death and his thirst for revenge, provides the film's most sustained villain characterization, transforming a traitor into a grieving father. The revelation that Walker's son died in a botched Black Ops mission that Sawyer authorized and then abandoned adds moral complexity to the president's peace platform, suggesting past sins motivate present violence. The film's treatment of the military-industrial complex as the true villain, with Raffleson as its political puppet and Walker as its military instrument, offers a critique that extends beyond individual bad actors to systemic corruption. John's diversionary fires, set throughout the White House using improvised incendiaries, create chaos that allows hostage rescue while also visually transforming the building into a burning symbol of national crisis. Donnie's killing of Killick with the bronze clock, striking repeatedly while screaming about historical preservation, provides the film's most satisfying villain death because it comes from an unexpected hero. The hostage liberation sequence, with civilians fleeing through burning corridors while terrorists pursue them, creates multiple simultaneous tensions that the film edits between with increasing rapidity. John's grenade belt kill of Stenz, using the terrorist leader's own weapon against him, provides closure to their physical rivalry while also eliminating the film's secondary antagonist. The suburban crash into the Oval Office, with John driving through the famous window, destroys the room that symbolizes presidential power, while also providing the vehicle for presidential rescue. The minigun that John uses to kill Walker, mounted on the crashed Suburban, represents the film's most excessive weapon, firing hundreds of rounds to kill a single man in operatic overkill. Emily's run across the White House lawn, waving the presidential flag while American warplanes approach, creates visual iconography that echoes Revolutionary War paintings and Civil War photographs. The airstrike's cancellation, with pilots recognizing the flag's signal and aborting their run, suggests that human judgment can override even lawful orders when circumstances change dramatically. Sawyer's survival of Walker's bullet, stopped by Lincoln's pocket watch, provides sentimental closure that would feel ridiculous in a serious film, but works within this film's self-aware universe. The watch's survival, dented but intact, becomes a physical trophy of the crisis, presumably returning to the presidential collection as an artifact of near disaster. The film's final twist, exposing Raffleson as Walker's accomplice, transforms a character who seemed merely cowardly into a genuine traitor, justifying audience suspicion of his earlier actions. Finnerty's investigation of Raffleson, conducted off-screen during the climax, demonstrates that institutional processes continue functioning even during crisis, with justice arriving after the guns fall silent. The Speaker's arrest, conducted quietly after Sawyer's return to power, avoids public spectacle, while still providing narrative justice for his role in the conspiracy. Sawyer's appointment of John to the Secret Service, witnessed by Emily's proud smile, completes both men's character arcs, with John achieving institutional validation and Sawyer gaining a loyal protector. The film's final shot, Marine One flying over Washington with peace deal announced, offers visual closure that emphasizes forward motion rather than dwelling on the destruction just witnessed. The film's post-climax scenes, showing the White House under repair and Donnie leading tours again, suggest that even catastrophic violence cannot permanently damage American institutions. The film's decision not to show Raffleson's trial or punishment keeps focus on positive resolution, rather than legal proceedings that would slow the ending's emotional momentum. The peace treaty's final acceptance by other nations, announced in the film's last lines, confirms that Sawyer's vision survived the attempt to destroy it, vindicating diplomacy over military aggression. The film's treatment of the military-industrial complex as defeated but not destroyed suggests that the fight for peace continues beyond the film's running time, a realistic rather than utopian conclusion. The relationship between John and Finnerty, adversarial at the film's opening and respectful at its close, demonstrates how crisis can reveal competence that bureaucratic processes cannot measure. Finnerty's recommendation of John for the Secret Service, delivered despite her earlier rejection, shows professional integrity that transcends personal pride or institutional defensiveness. The film's final father-daughter moment, with John hugging Emily on the White House lawn, provides emotional payoff for every action sequence that came before, grounding spectacle in human connection. The film's use of the Marine One helicopter as both transport and symbol, lifting John and Emily away from the building they saved, emphasizes forward movement rather than static victory. The film's closing music, reprising themes heard during the opening credits, creates musical bookends that signal narrative completion and emotional resolution. The film's final fade to black, followed by credits over images of the real White House, reminds audiences that the building they watched being destroyed remains standing in reality. The film's overall structure, from domestic failure to heroic success to institutional validation, follows the classical Hollywood redemption arc that audiences have responded to for nearly a century. The film's treatment of violence as both destructive and redemptive, killing villains while saving innocents, reflects American action cinema's fundamental contradiction about the morality of force. The film's body count, never explicitly counted but clearly substantial, raises questions about whether the hero's violence differs morally from the villain's violence beyond target selection. The film's decision to show terrorist deaths in detail, while keeping Secret Service deaths relatively bloodless, prioritizes audience sympathy for law enforcement victims over enemy combatants. The film's use of slow motion during key deaths, including Stenz's grenade belt explosion, emphasizes violence as spectacle rather than tragedy, prioritizing visual impact over emotional weight. The film's sound design for deaths, with gunshots echoing differently depending on room acoustics, adds documentary realism that makes violence feel more immediate and therefore more disturbing. The film's refusal to show civilian deaths, with all named hostages surviving, creates a sanitized violence where only combatants and authority figures perish. The film's treatment of the terrorists as essentially faceless, with only Stenz and Killick receiving characterization, dehumanizes them in ways that make their deaths less morally troubling. The film's use of the White House as a battlefield, with bullets striking portraits of former presidents and shells landing on historic floors, adds cultural violence to physical destruction. The film's moment of silence after major deaths, including the vice president's off-screen killing, acknowledges loss while quickly moving on to maintain action momentum. The film's final body count, with dozens of terrorists dead and most hostages alive, presents violence as having achieved positive outcomes, a message that critics found problematic. The film's treatment of Sawyer's injuries, including his bullet wound and his pool drowning, adds physical vulnerability that makes his survival feel earned rather than automatic. The film's decision to have John kill Walker with a minigun, rather than in hand-to-hand combat, prioritizes firepower over personal confrontation, a choice that feels less satisfying dramatically. The film's use of the bronze clock as a murder weapon, with Donnie bludgeoning Killick repeatedly, transforms a historical artifact into an instrument of contemporary violence. The film's treatment of the Lincoln Watch as a shield, stopping a bullet that would have killed Sawyer, transforms a sentimental object into practical armor through sheer coincidence. The film's overall message about violence, that it can be justified when protecting family and country, reflects mainstream American attitudes that the film never seriously challenges. The film's production design for the Oval Office, including the famous Resolute desk and the presidential flag, replicates details that White House tourists would recognize while adding action-friendly modifications. The film's set construction for the Blue Room, where the hostages are held, required building two versions of the famous elliptical salon, one for dialogue and one for destruction. The film's prop department created multiple versions of the nuclear football, including a hero version for close-ups and stunt versions for action sequences where it might be damaged. The film's costume design for the terrorists, all wearing identical tactical gear with American flag patches, visually ironizes their anti-government violence through patriotic symbolism. The film's makeup department created prosthetic wounds for Sawyer that progress from fresh injury to healing bruise across the film's running time, tracking his physical deterioration. The film's visual effects for the Air Force One explosion, completed by a vendor that specialized in aerial destruction, required matching footage shot on a physical aircraft mock-up. The film's second unit photography in Washington, D.C., captured establishing shots that were then digitally extended to match the Montreal soundstage lighting conditions. The film's color grading process, overseen by cinematographer Anna Forster, shifted the White House interiors from warm golds to cold blues as the siege progressed, visually encoding the building's transformation from home to battleground. The film's sound mixing prioritized dialogue during character scenes and effects during action sequences, with the transition between modes often signaled by musical cues. The film's original score, recorded with the Hollywood Studio Symphony, used live musicians rather than samples, giving the action sequences orchestral weight that synthesized instruments cannot replicate. The film's editing team created multiple versions of key sequences, testing different pacing with preview audiences to determine which cuts generated strongest reactions. The film's title design, featuring the White House burning behind the film's title, established the film's tone of patriotic destruction before a single frame of narrative played. The film's marketing trailer, released 6 months before the film, emphasized the White House explosion over character drama, attracting action fans while potentially repelling audiences seeking substance. The film's international posters, altered for markets where burning American flags would provoke negative reactions, replaced the flag with smoke or changed its coloration entirely. The film's home video cover art, released after the theatrical run, features John and Sawyer standing back-to-back with the White House behind them, emphasizing partnership over destruction. The film's streaming thumbnail, optimized for small screens, shows Tatum's face in close-up with explosions behind him, prioritizing star power over situational context. The film's legacy in action cinema studies focuses on its self-awareness, with scholars debating whether the film's ridiculous moments represent failed seriousness or successful satire. The film's treatment of the buddy action formula, pairing a working-class hero with an elite professional, follows patterns established by 48 Hours, and refined through decades of Hollywood productions. The film's use of the White House as a single location, with characters trapped inside a confined space, belongs to the die-hard tradition of contained thrillers that maximize tension through spatial limitation. The film's father-daughter emotional core distinguishes it from male-bonding action films, centering paternal love rather than homosocial friendship as the hero's primary motivation. The film's political message, advocating diplomacy while celebrating military capability, reflects the contradictions of liberal interventionism that defined Obama-era foreign policy. The film's treatment of terrorism as a tool of the military-industrial complex, rather than foreign extremism, inverts the usual action movie politics by making the American government the source of the threat. The film's depiction of the president as a physically capable action hero, rather than a helpless commander, anticipates later films where leaders fight alongside their protectors. The film's use of a child as a plot-critical character, rather than a hostage to be rescued, influenced subsequent action films that gave younger actors more agency in dangerous situations. The film's treatment of social media as a force for good, with Emily's video exposing the terrorists, reflects 2013 optimism that seems dated after a decade of platform criticism. The film's position within Emmerich's filmography, between global disaster and alien invasion, shows the director applying his destruction aesthetic to smaller-scale, more human conflicts. The film's commercial disappointment, relative to its budget, contributed to Hollywood's shift away from original action properties toward established franchises with guaranteed audiences. The film's critical reception, mixed but not hostile, represents a middle ground between the director's earlier successes and his later failures, a plateau rather than a peak or valley. The film's audience scores, consistently higher than critical scores, suggest a disconnect between what professional reviewers value and what general audiences enjoy in action cinema. The film's cable television success, with annual broadcasts reaching millions of viewers, demonstrates that theatrical box office does not determine long-term cultural impact. The film's streaming performance, consistently strong across multiple platforms, has made it a staple of digital action libraries despite its initial commercial disappointment. The film's final assessment, after more than a decade of availability, is that it succeeds as entertainment while failing as art, a verdict its defenders embrace and its detractors dismiss as insufficient. The film's treatment of the presidential succession line, moving from Sawyer to Hammond to Raffleson before returning to Sawyer, demonstrates how constitutional mechanisms can both stabilize and destabilize governance, depending on who holds power at each moment. Walker's conspiracy specifically targets the continuity of government protocols, understanding that killing the president is less effective than controlling who replaces him, a sophisticated strategic insight rare in action cinema. The film's depiction of the Pentagon's delayed response, with generals demanding confirmation before acting while civilians die inside the White House, critiques military bureaucracy without dismissing the genuine need for verification before lethal force. Raffleson's order to bomb the White House, issued under constitutional authority as acting president, raises uncomfortable questions about whether legally authorized violence becomes acceptable even when based on incomplete information. The film's resolution, with constitutional order restored and the traitorous speaker arrested, reaffirms faith in American governance structures despite spending 2 hours demonstrating their vulnerability to insider manipulation. The film's production challenges included coordinating the suburban crash into the Oval Office set, a sequence that required precise timing between the vehicle's entry, the actor's safety positioning, and multiple camera angles capturing the destruction from every perspective. The stunt team constructed a reinforced ramp hidden beneath the White House lawn set, allowing the Suburban to achieve sufficient speed for a dramatic crash while maintaining control through the Oval Office window replica. The practical explosion effects for the car chase, including the limousine's rocket launcher deployment and the helicopter crash on the South Lawn, were filmed with live pyrotechnics rather than digital additions, giving those sequences tangible weight. The visual effects team for the Air Force One destruction worked from blueprints of the actual aircraft, creating a digital model that could be disassembled piece by piece for maximum dramatic impact across multiple camera angles. The film's sound designers recorded actual gunfire at a military range, then manipulated those recordings to match the specific acoustics of each White House room represented on screen, from the marble floors of the entrance hall to the carpeted quiet of the Oval Office. The film's cultural impact includes inspiring Halloween costumes combining presidential suits with tactical gear, a fusion of authority and action that children found appealing and parents found mildly unsettling. The film's dialogue, particularly Sawyer's, "Penn is mightier" line and Donnie's rants about historical preservation, entered the lexicon of action movie quotables cited by fans during subsequent decades. The film's treatment of the White House as an action playground influenced video game level design, with several first-person shooters releasing levels that echo the film's room-by-room traversal of the famous building. The film's father-daughter dynamic, with Emily's competence matching John's heroism, provided a template for subsequent action films seeking to avoid the screaming child hostage trope that dominated earlier decades. The film's political stance, progressive on diplomacy while conservative on violence, reflects the incoherence of American popular culture's relationship with military power, loving the weapons while questioning the wars that deploy them. The film's critical reevaluation in recent years has benefited from the decline of similar action spectacles, with audiences rediscovering its practical stunts and star chemistry amid a landscape dominated by weightless digital superhero battles. Younger viewers discovering the film through streaming platforms often express surprise at its self-awareness, expecting earnestness from 2013 cinema, but finding a film that knows exactly how ridiculous its premise remains. The film's treatment of the president as an action hero, once considered absurd, now seems almost restrained compared to later films where world leaders perform martial arts and pilot fighter jets into alien spacecraft. The film's box office disappointment, once seen as a failure, now appears as a predictable outcome of releasing a patriotic action film in a summer dominated by franchises with pre-sold audiences. The film's legacy as a cult favorite, celebrated for its excesses rather than despite them, represents a more honorable fate than many better-reviewed films that were quickly forgotten after their theatrical runs concluded.